Right, here we are, the big daddy, the end of our Language Paper 2 exam, section A, and this is, I think, the hardest question. It's the amalgamation of everything that you've been learning in your GCSE course, and it's worth 16 marks. So here it is, loads of words to scare you off, but really the big thing we're interested in is this line here. Compare how the writer of each source conveys their attitude to nursing. So what the examiner wants you to be doing here is looking at how the writers have their different points of view, what are their attitudes to the topic. They want to know how the writers have communicated this, and they want to know what methods and views they've used similarly and different. This is essentially a question is asking what and how. What does the writer think? How do they do it? Now, you want to be super duper careful that you are including both sets of methods here, both language and non-language. This is not just a language question, but it's also not like question 3 in paper 1 where it's just a structure one. It wants a mega mix, it wants a bit of all sorts. So we want to be talking about our words, our techniques and our sentences, but we also want to be thinking about non-language choices as well. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit more in a moment. Now you want to be looking super careful at what the focus of this is. This one wants to know about the attitude to nursing, nothing else but that. So all of my points and all of my arguments need to come back to that. So methods, for me, they split into 6 different little chunks, 6 little sections. First of all, you've got the simple ones, vocabulary, word choices. Yeah, what are the words, what are the connotations, what do they tell us? Then we've got our structure, which we talked about in paper 1, and our bit Venn choices. Then we've got our language techniques, similes, metaphors, alliteration. We've also got our sentence choices, both our forms and our types. And then we're moving on to our non-language choices. Now the easiest ones to deal with really are the focuses. What are the personas they focused on? What are the characters they focused on? What's the setting? And why have they focused on the weather? What is the weather like? But then also the mode and the tone being used. Is it a passive piece? Is it quite active? Are they involved in the action, or is it more observational? There's probably enough here for you to get through any question form. You'll probably do quite well as well with just these techniques they've got here. However, there are stacks of non-language choices that we'll go on to a bit more at another time. So our approach. We need source A and we need to be looking at it alongside source B. Now the first question we need to be asking ourselves is, what is their attitude? What do these nurses think of their being a nurse? Now sometimes it'll be different, and source A might think something completely different to source B, but for me in this occasion they've got a very similar argument. That both writers see it as a challenging job, both see many barriers and difficulties, however they both agree that they play a vital role in supporting their patients. So now I've got my argument, my central point of view is now about finding myself some methods. Now I need to be asking myself 2 questions. I need to find methods they've got in common, but also methods that they use differently. Now, let's do the ones in common, because this is the one that students find hardest most of all. Make it easy for yourself. The vast majority of AQA texts are going to be including things like these. They're always going to have figurative language in. You can't write a text without a semantic field. Every text needs to have structural choices, such as openings and endings. The vast majority of texts has got a character in them, and the vast majority of them are also going to refer to the setting or the weather in some description. So you want to be going into your exam with these sorts of ideas already in your head. I knew straight off, because this is an AQA exam, there's going to be metaphors. So where are they? There they are. In the yellow or the orange colour, I've found 2 metaphors, one in source A and one in source B. So now I can compare how the metaphor has been used. Then I dig a little bit deeper. I can see source B is using proper nouns, and I'm seeing source A is using interesting verbs. Different language choices. I want to be finding 1 or 2 methods they've got in common, such as the orange ones here, and then 1 or 2 methods that are unique to each source, such as the purple ones. Now I've got an overall argument and I've got my quotes ready to go. I'm ready to start writing. Now, just like question 3, we need to have a 1-sentence introduction that establishes the writer's attitude. So here it is. Both writers see nursing as a challenging job that has many barriers and difficulties. However, they also both agree they play a vital role in supporting their patients. Bish bash bosh. This one's got one in common. However, if they are very different, I'd use a start line I've got at the bottom left of the screen. Now I'm ready to write up my actual analysis and start picking up some marks. Now the very first line of this paragraph is the most important one, and it's what we call a coat hanger statement, because it's where we hang the rest of our ideas off and hang the rest of our analysis off. Now, it is really important, that first point, that you show you're a student who's going to start drawing ideas together from the different texts. You're going to be starting comparing right from the word go. So you're going to establish what the both texts have in common. So here's mine. Both nurses use metaphors to describe their experiences in nursing and people's lack of understanding about it. So I've established they both use the same technique, and I've established they are both using it for a similar purpose. I start off with source B because I think it's a richer quote and I want to get going with some high marks. So I start with source B. Nightingale uses a London hospital as a garden of flowers, and then I say why she's used it. Then I come on to my explanation. Now, my explanation is not massively long. It's not like question 3 where I've got layers and layers and layers of ideas, but it's completely driven by the method choice. I talk about why Nightingale used that metaphor, what that metaphor tells us about her attitude to nursing, and I'm looking at it in 2 different angles. So I layer up a couple of different ideas in what way nursing must be like a garden of flowers. I then link it to the other source, so I put the same technique, the different quote obviously, for the other source, and I establish why they use that metaphor there. And then I'll do exactly the same thing for the other source, explaining what that metaphor does for that person's attitude, in what way is being a nurse like being in the army, and again I give a couple of different interpretations, a couple of different ideas. So I would then carry on in that vein. I've got my little one-line introduction and I've got my first Peely paragraph. I'd now go on to another one which focuses on the different techniques, how one source uses one technique in one way and the other source uses a completely different technique in a completely different way. And then I'm going to look at my watch. But at this point I've got 2 clear Peely paragraphs then. Have I got time for one more on either another similarity or difference? That will depend on how well you follow this structure, how well you stick to this approach, and how rigorous and strict you are with your timing. This question is a horrible question, but it is achievable. You can succeed in it if you follow that structure properly. Good luck.